Welcome to MojoPlays, and I was enjoying this game a bunch until all this Game of the Year buzz started. Then the contrarian in me started being a little bitch. These are 10 reasons why Black Myth Wukong isn't that great. Black Myth Wukong is a good game, but the reason 10 out of 10 is reserved for games like God of War, Elden Ring, and Red Dead Redemption 2 is because they aren't filled with more glaring issues than I can count on my hands. 8 out of 10 is still a very respectable score, guys. Before we continue, we publish content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified of our latest videos. Performance issues / bugs. Let's start gently with a more broad complaint than invisible walls, but we'll get to that soon, don't you worry. Admittedly, performance issues have become expected with releases in 2024, but Black Myth Wukong has more than a few kinks to iron out, because on day one of release, it was very kinky. With the PS5 game expecting long delays to work out the low frame rate / stuttering issues, PC players falling through the map at random points, and Xbox players simply waiting for the game after finding out a month ago the release was going to be delayed due to technical issues, we can see that Black Myth Wukong has started their journey a little shaky, but somehow this doesn't seem to have affected audience response, because apparently I'm the only person whinging. I'm going to whinge for another 9 entries. Let's go. Level design / no map. Here's an entry that at least half of it we can all agree on, so let's start with that half. The fact that the game has no map and no way to find where you are in the local environment is not a good design choice. It feels lazy and only aims to highlight the weak level design. That's right, I'm calling out the level design. Come for me. Please don't come for me, I'm very sensitive. Once you're in a world, once you're in a chapter, the actual elements that build up that world are just, unfortunately, not that diverse. Now, the levels are beautiful, not as beautiful as we were led to believe through trailers, but the actual level design and layout has come under criticism from a bunch of players. The worst example of this being Chapter 3, which overstays its welcome well and truly. Dying doesn't matter. I'm not the dictator of what is and what isn't a Souls-like game, and if you go to the internet to see what people are saying, you're going to notice the entire audience is split. For me personally, a lot of the game appears incredibly Souls-like. The Souls vibes can be seen through every single one of the game's core mechanics. Regardless of whether you believe it is or isn't a Souls-like game, doesn't matter. Everyone agrees that it is incredibly difficult at times, and some gamers feel that the difficulty is completely undermined when dying has zero effect on your game. You don't lose will, you don't get a negative status effect, you just get to continue on your journey and keep leveling up until you beat that bit without having to be careful about it or manage your will. Hey, don't get me wrong, this might be the way some players want their difficult games to be, filled with safety nets and fail safes. I'm not here to judge. I'm such a piece of shit. The combat camera. I said to myself when I was writing this list that I had to make sure I was fair and concise and didn't waste time making tasteless attacking jokes, because everyone who talks negatively about this game gets bombarded with hateful comments. But I'm 3 entries in and I've already been such a smartass I may as well dive in head first. The combat camera in Black Myth Wukong sucks farts! It's uncooperative, tough to work around, and arguably the worst of any Souls-like game. I'm surprised there aren't more people complaining about this. I'm used to typical issues like the camera losing its mind when you're sandwiched between an enemy and a wall behind you, but Wukong's camera can barely track the enemy's movements. Get stuck in a corner and you may as well close your eyes. It also just drops lock-on at random points. Why? Monkey abilities. I don't have to say much about this entry because it's pretty straightforward. Why even be a monkey without any interesting ways to traverse the environment? I'm a monkey, why does the game not have a climb feature? It's so boring. The biggest criticism defenders of the game make about this particular criticism is this is the problem with the Western view. Monkey Man must act like monkey and eat bananas. Look into the mythology of this character. They say this as if it's some sort of conversation-winning silver bullet. Sun Wukong could jump 500 meters in a single leap. At his most powerful, he jumped 36,000 miles in a single leap. Admittedly, over time, he did become more man than monkey, but he never lost these wild abilities, which could easily be put on display in the game's traversal mechanics. I mean, he's high jumping and darting around the map whenever he's in combat, transforming into a beetle and balancing atop a 20-foot pole without breaking a sweat, but it's the Western view that's to blame when we expect him to be able to climb a viney wall. Ludicrous. Developer controversy. To mark our halfway point, we're going to address something that doesn't have anything to do with the actual game, but for a good chunk of players it's still important, so we're going to address it. With the development company being hit with multiple accusations of sexist behavior, they turned that over to influencers and reviewers being given early access in the run-up to the game's launch. Screenshots of a document from Game Science began circulating on social media featuring instructions on what influencers were and were not allowed to discuss. The prohibited topics included COVID-19, politics, the Chinese game industry, fetishization, feminist propaganda, and other content that instigates negative discourse. I encourage you to look into some of the things the studio's team have said in the last couple of years, because it's pretty wild. I've got a thick skin, but even I was reading some of this stuff and saying, good lord. Regardless of whether you believe in separating the artist from the art, it's odd for a developer to dictate how a reviewer can talk about a game. And although this doesn't affect the actual game, I wouldn't buy my groceries from my local supermarket if the supermarket had posters saying fatties should f*** off, something they actually did. Some people just aren't happy giving money to bad people, which I think is valid. Unbalanced. Black Myth Wukong may well be one of the more fun games I've played this year, regardless of what I've been saying up until this point. Like I said, 8 out of 10 is still a good game, but I don't live in black and whites. I thrive in the grey, and in the grey is where I'm quite happy to say that regardless of how much I enjoy it, Black Myth Wukong is one of the most unbalanced games I've ever experienced. With some bosses being so hard to beat it's borderline broken, following straight after a boss that was like cutting through butter, the game has a difficulty reminiscent of a Skrillex waveform. While the powers of the Destined One are thrilling, the base combos feel disappointingly weak and lack impact, which ties straight into our next entry. Combat is a mixed bag. At its best, the combat in Black Myth Wukong can feel like a finely tuned dance requiring precise timing and understanding of your different stances. At its worst, the combat in Black Myth Wukong can feel like awkwardly grinding on a girl at the Year 10 formal while the girl you actually wanted to dance with is in the toilets making out with Justin Luglin. I shouldn't have used his real name. There's a certain button-mashy nature to the combat that is made apparent in the tankier boss fights, which makes dying and starting from scratch even more tedious than in similar games. While similar games provide a euphoric sense of accomplishment when defeating their toughest boss fights, you don't really get this in Black Myth Wukong, because sometimes you don't even mean to be that good. Oh, and I know I need to move on, but the single weapon adds to this feeling of underwhelming tedium. Seriously, one weapon across the whole game? I'll shut up now. Inconsequential Story.
可大王一日不出谷底，你我就得再熬一日，熬住了才有活命。
I can imagine for fans of Journey to the West, this game would be a really cool experience. To see your favorite mythology and characters brought to life in a video game is something that doesn't happen very often, especially in this order. For new fans, the game had the opportunity to suck them into this world like the book did, but unfortunately, for the most part, Black Myth's story is largely inconsequential and really relies on having already read Journey to the West to get its full impact. The story only really acts as a way to take players from one level to the next, while introducing them to various characters pulled from Journey to the West. The dialogue is clunky and the voice acting is unimpressive, and while this shouldn't be that important, as few people play these types of games for the story anyway, the game was consistently pushed as non-Souls-like, with the developers stating clearly that it was more narratively driven through cutscenes than Souls-like games traditionally are. Invisible Walls. This is without a doubt one of the worst things about the game, and I knew before I even started this list that it would go in the #1 spot. The invisible boundaries / invisible wall tactic to game development is so outdated that it literally drags the entire game down. The world looks so explorable and beautiful from a distance, but its linear boundaries are highlighted so aggressively when areas that the character could clearly get to are blocked by invisible walls. It's egregious. The invisible walls play into almost every entry on this list in one way or another. Clunky combat, bad level design, bugs and glitches, and monkey abilities. If I see another direction I can clearly go in this game only to start walking in place one more freaking time, I'm gonna snap the disc. 9 out of 10. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from MojoPlays and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of our latest videos.